Good evening and welcome to LPTV. My name is Dan Fishman. I'm the Executive Director of the Libertarian Party, and you are watching Libertarian Party Television, where we talk to you about libertarian issues, libertarian news, and libertarians make a difference across the country. My two guests tonight are libertarians who have been making an enormous difference because they have been elected at local government. Shannon Thomason is the mayor of Big Spring, Texas, and Cassaundra Fryman is the mayor of Plymouth, Ohio. And they both have had huge weeks, so I would like to bring them in. And we'll talk to Shannon first, then we're going to bring in Cassaundra, and then we'll have a group conversation about everybody. So first, let me start off and welcome to the show, Shannon Thomason. Shannon, thanks so much for joining us on LPTV.
Oh, my pleasure, Dan.
So I had the great good fortune to chat with you very briefly over last weekend as I was saying thanks to everybody who did the amazing thing in Big Spring of making a big public event happen. So can you give us a little background about what happened in your town last weekend?
Well, sure. And it dates back to about the end of June when a member of the LP Texas Convention Committee reached out to me with some concerns about what was happening in Hidalgo County and the possibility that McAllen might have to withdraw from the convention and not let the convention happen. And it's the actually, and a shout out to the newly elected treasurer of LP Texas, Kate Prather. She was on the convention committee. She contacted me and said, essentially said, "Can you?" And my response is, "Can do."
And so let's just, for people who aren't familiar with Texas, Hidalgo County is down and McAllen's down right on the border.
Correct, and the Rio Grande Valley.
Right, and Big Spring, for people who don't understand, even though it's on the same half of the state, it is miles and miles away.
Yeah, easily 400 or 500 miles.
Right,
from
but
McAllen.
McAllen, the city had shut down the convention twice, right?
Correct.
So they tried to have one. Go ahead.
Yeah, it had been delayed twice, as I understand, and then essentially less than 2 weeks before the convention was supposed to gavel in, the county judge of Hidalgo County commandeered the convention center for use as an emergency hospital facility. Unfortunately, the Rio Grande Valley is just being inundated with new COVID-19 cases. So they were looking for a place to, number one, try to have an in-person convention of some sort, but also number two, that wasn't nearly as badly affected by COVID-19.
So that's great. So then, of course, they have this, LP Texas has this ace in a hole that you, as a libertarian, are the elected mayor of Big Spring, Texas. And how long have you been the mayor there?
I was sworn into office on the 11th of June of last year. So just a little over a year.
So just enough to know where everything is,
right?
Kind of figure out your way. And you guys had a lot of technical challenges, but you had a great space available for the convention. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, we've got our municipal auditorium, which is a beautiful Spanish Revival type building, or Spanish Revival architecture building that was built in 1931, dedicated in 1932. Has seen, oh Lord, it started off as a silent film theater.
Wow.
And the stage has seen everybody from Louis Armstrong to Elvis over the years.
That's awesome. So this amazing venue, and then Big Spring, just to let people know, you're not near any major metropolitan area, right? So you guys have, go ahead.
We're not real close. We've got the Midland, Odessa, the Petroplex is just west of us. So I believe Midland is about 300,000 people now. Odessa, maybe a little below that. So,
Right.
a metropolitan area of about 500,000 people, about 40 miles west of us.
Gotcha. And most people are familiar, I think, probably from Friday Night Lights. We're talking
absolutely.
about
Yeah.
that area,
Yeah.
the giant famous football area.
Odessa,
in West
Permian,
Texas.
absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now the other interesting thing about it, though, was that in terms of internet connectivity, you were able to provide something that was invaluable to the convention. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, we, as I said, it's a 1932 building, and we do our best to try to keep it basically as original as we possibly can. But one of the things that we've never really tried using that as a convention or meeting venue.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have hardwired internet connectivity in the building, which is now something we're looking at. So my position as mayor under Texas law also makes me the emergency management director for the city. So one of the tools that we have at our disposal are 5G cradle points. So we can go set up a wireless network or provide wireless internet connectivity pretty much anywhere we can get a 5G signal.
Wow.
So we had 4 of those available to the city. So we broke those out and brought them in and was able to get the convention connected.
That's awesome. So that's a really impressive technological accomplishment. Now, let me ask you this. You're the mayor of the town. Your local businesses must have been pretty psyched that all of a sudden a bunch of hotels, bunch of, I'm not saying that we're a hard drinking party, but the best comment I heard somebody posted was, I've closed a lot more bars than governors have because of COVID.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we brought in a couple of hard drinkings too. So that must have been a huge boon for your town.
Oh, absolutely. Well, our Convention and Visitors Bureau got involved and helped subsidize it as well because and I realize that's not a popular stance with libertarians, using government funds for these type of events, but the taxes are collected anyway, and that's what they're there for. So our CDB was able to inject some funds into the event. It certainly didn't completely subsidize it, but it certainly helped.
Sure.
But one thing about it is putting those funds in, the numbers we get back are that every dollar that we can invest in an event like that coming to Big Spring, we get back about $10 for every dollar we put in.
Sure.
To our businesses and to our local community. So,
well, and not to mention the fact that now you have, I think you had, there's like 150 people who came to town who are now going back and say, oh yeah, I would totally do business in Big Spring again. Sure. I would have another convention there. And so, I mean, that's sort of word of mouth, and because it was also broadcast live too.
Right.
So all the people who see it live are thinking, wow, Big Spring, they can do real business there. You could have a convention there, and it's a great place to actually have a convention if you want to get away from the distraction of, or you don't want to be in a Houston or a Dallas. Big Spring's got a lot of stuff going for it.
Oh, sure. Well, it was a little warm last weekend, no doubt, but it's August in Texas. What can I say?
Yeah, I was going to say,
and we're out in West Texas, so we're in the desert.
I mean, it's impressive to have a libertarian mayor, and we know that you solve a lot of problems, but we don't expect you can solve summer in Texas.
Well,
it's going to be hot.
Working on it, but it's a long road.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you telling me about that. I'm going to bring you back in. We're going to talk more about governing as a libertarian, some of those issues that we have. For the next guest that I'm going to bring on is the mayor of Plymouth, Ohio, Cassaundra Fryman. Cassaundra, let me click here. Welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Thanks so much for coming to us. Now, you also had a very exciting, I mean, yours is I think it was the 28th, 25th.
Yeah.
Tell me about your very exciting day, your very exciting council meeting.
So I got my council to pass a marijuana decriminalization ordinance in our village with a 3-3 vote, and I was the fourth tie-breaking vote in favor. So now Plymouth no longer charges fines for misdemeanor marijuana charges.
So that's a pretty big impacting bill, because obviously it means there's no reason to stop a car and search it because, oh, I smell marijuana.
Exactly.
At least not for your municipal police. Now, let me ask you this: do you have? I'm not familiar with what the county system is like in Ohio. Do you have a powerful sheriff that has arrest powers?
We have our own police department in Plymouth.
Gotcha.
And they typically are the ones who handle all things within the limits. We do have a county sheriff's department, but state of Ohio law is interesting right now because they have to have THC that's confiscated tested for its level, because hemp is legal in Ohio, but marijuana is not. So in order for them to prosecute, they have to have it tested in a lab. So already it's very cost prohibitive for them to enforce it. So they really aren't enforcing it as it is now in Ohio regardless. But what this law does, or what this ordinance does, is it changes any fines or court costs from the misdemeanors that may have been given in case they were tested in a lab. So it really throws the case out. You may still have a misdemeanor charge, but you're much less likely to if they're not enforcing it.
No, that's a fantastic, it's a great nuanced place to be. So you said it was a 3-3 vote. So did you get a feeling there's a difference between where the council was and where the community was on this? Or is the community divided too?
Everyone in my community that I've talked to has been very much in support of this ordinance. I know many people in my community that use it for different reasons. It's something that a lot of people are really in favor of. And even if they're opposed to it, it's not a strong opposition, because I think in today's world, most people understand that it does have effective uses. And, the attention that I brought to it was, even if you don't have a medical card, there are things that you may want to use it for that are not covered under that, especially anxiety and different things like that a lot of people that I know use to treat it. So, I was trying to compel an empathy vote with my council members, and I think it worked, because I did have one that I didn't think would pass it that voted yes. So I was very surprised by that and happy with it as well. So I think the ball is moving down the court that way.
And that's actually, that one person is obviously critical, because it was a tie vote and you were the deciding vote. So if that person had not changed. So let me ask you this. Did you consult with the police department at all? Did they give you an opinion?
I did consult with my police department. Absolutely. I told them that this was something that I was very strongly in favor of and something that I really wanted to see happen. And they were of the mindset that, they were in favor of it. They said, whatever way it goes, we'll go with. It didn't really change the state law, so they're not in violation of anything that's already a written law. They know that if they go and get it sent off and it comes back, there's no fine or court costs for it. So, they were okay with it.
Interesting. One of the interesting things, so I was in Massachusetts. I lived in Massachusetts when we legalized cannabis in 2016. And one of the fascinating comments that was made by a lot of the police departments was, ask any officer when they go out on a domestic call, would they rather encounter people who've been drinking or people who've been smoking marijuana? And there's no comparison between them. And so I think that that's one of those things that makes a big difference. So tell me a little bit about, you were also the person who introduced this bill, right?
Yes, with the help of the Libertarian Party of Ohio, as well as Sensible Ohio, which is a pot decriminalization organization. They want it legalized. They want it to be accessible to more people. So they do amazing work helping to get the legislation written, as well as ballot and signatures to get it on the ballot for different communities. They are having a hard time getting it on the ballot in communities right now because of COVID. The signatures are very hard to acquire. So getting it passed through an ordinance is definitely the easier way right now with all of the difficulties they're having with signatures. But they were very helpful. They gave me the legislation from another community that had passed it previously, and then I had my solicitor draft it to fit my community, and that's what we went with.
That's awesome. Now, Ohio also has a slightly complicated history with legalizing cannabis because, as I recall, in 2016, you did have a statewide referendum, but it was a very corporate, pro-corporation marijuana bill. Can you tell me more about that?
A lot of people who would have been in favor of that legislation actually voted against it because the way it was set up seemed like it was going to be a monopoly. And that wasn't what the people who were in favor of legalization intended. So it was voted down, and we really haven't had a strong legislation attempt since then. They were working on it this year, but again, with COVID, getting the signatures necessary to put on the ballot has been a very difficult task for them. I've talked with some of the volunteers who are working towards it, but for right now, it's just not something that's easily achieved.
That's an interesting point. And so it's interesting too, because essentially what you're saying to me is that, it was a very considered opinion. The Ohio electorate really understood the issues of that bill and voted against it. And so now we're seeing what a lot of libertarians approve of better, which is localism. You guys are making bills at your level, which makes a lot more sense. I really appreciate the fact that you were able to do that. And how long have you been Mayor Fryman?
Since January.
Since January. So you're really just finding out, sort of everything about it. Had you been on the city council before?
I have not. It basically started with me being a volunteer in the predominant nonprofit organization in Plymouth, the Plymouth Improvement Committee, which serves a lot of different purposes for the community. We meet different needs that come up. We privately funded the pool 2 years ago because council had voted to close it. So we took that upon ourselves because the village didn't have the money for it. And that kind of dipped my toe into the political part of it because I could see the inner workings, the walls that were put up, and I wanted to be part of removing those walls, part of removing the barriers to access the different things that council can do. But now that I'm mayor, I have a better understanding of the inner workings of that as well. But really my goal is to help merge, private organizations and government to help each other because everybody benefits from it when there's communication, when you say yes instead of no. We're trying to move mountains and we just don't have money to work with here. So, it's just a matter of time before we can kind of work those things out.
So that leads me into the topic that I think we're going to bring Shannon back in for, which is being a libertarian in a city, in a world that thinks we have three arms and we want to close all the schools and kill all the roads and stuff like that. And so I wonder, and I'll throw this to you, Shannon, first. Have you surprised people at your willingness to actually be a hard worker in government because they think, oh, libertarian, you must be doing something else?
Well, and one of the things that I tell my colleagues in the party, especially the ones seeking office, is know your audience. I consider myself a conservative libertarian, so there are things on the platform that I strongly agree with and things that I don't agree with. But so the more conservative aspects that appeal to my constituents are the ones I really push. So small government, low taxes, staying out of people's business, not closing down businesses during COVID, things like that really appeal to folks.
And how about you, Mayor Fryman? Are there situations where people didn't know what they were going to get when a libertarian was elected? Did people know you were a libertarian when you were running for office?
My mayor's office is nonpartisan, so libertarian doesn't come up next to my name on the ballot. People certainly did ask what I was running as, and I had a lot of good questions. People were curious. They didn't really know what a libertarian was or what changes I would want to implement. So it's been a really good experience overall, and I've actually gotten several people in the community to be active libertarians in my party and my county. It's really exciting. I have a couple of people that may be running for council in 2021 as libertarians. So fingers crossed that they follow through with that, but it's a very exciting time for my community. I love going down my street and seeing Jorgensen signs in yards. That's probably the best thing that I've accomplished so far this year. Just knowing that people on the main drag are coming to me and asking for Jorgensen signs, or what can we do to help the party? They want to learn more about it. Lots of good questions are being asked right now.
That's great stuff, and it certainly is interesting to see how a lot of people are looking for alternatives at the top level and looking to their local elected leaders to say, isn't there something else? And I think it's a big benefit that they see mayors like you guys, and you're not crazy. You haven't done anything. You haven't closed the police department or anything else. So let me come to you, Mayor Fryman, and ask you, what's something else? Is there anything else that you've done that you think, oh, this is a way that I showed people what libertarians actually can accomplish, a solution that a Republican or a Democrat probably wouldn't have come up with while you've been in office in the 7 months you've been there?
Definitely funding the pool privately was something that I was very passionate about. I worked for 2 years to raise money with fundraisers and different sponsors to fund it so that the government wouldn't be shouldered with that responsibility. Ultimately, my goal with that would be for it to sustain itself. I know that's a lofty goal. Pools are typically known as community money sucks. But I think once we get it patched up this year and get it reopened next year, it'll be sitting very good in a position to at least break even. It doesn't have to make money. I just want it to at least break even. So that would be something that would be a good segue for a privately funded public work.
So it's an interesting question I have to ask. Ohio, how long does the pool stay open for?
We typically open it the end of May to August.
Yeah. So the summer months. That's
Yep.
interesting. So let me come to Mayor Thomason. Thomason. And anything like that for you? Have there been other things that you've accomplished that you think, oh, this is really me doing a good job of getting government out of the way, doing a libertarian thing that you thought, oh yeah, I really showed this is what Libertarian Party stands for?
Well, and one of the things that I ran on and am really pushing for is to follow the example of some other Texas cities and to set our city property tax rate to 0%. And one of the things that if there is a silver lining to COVID-19 is our city revenues from property taxes, sales taxes, especially from sales taxes and our other revenue streams. We actually get oil revenues. The city owns mineral rights and receives payments for mineral leases. So, but with that drop in our revenue streams, we had to drastically revisit our budget. But the beautiful thing about that is the $4 million in cuts that we've made in our budget, when our revenue streams start coming back, we will have learned to live within that budget. And so when sales tax or a consumption tax starts rising again, every additional dime of that will go towards reducing property taxes.
That is an outstanding thing that I hadn't thought about. And if I can follow up with you on that. So your budget had to be dramatically slashed. And how much of, as I recall, and I know it varies greatly from state to state, and I do self-identify as a Texan, having done my first undergrad at UT and grown up in Galveston. But your school district is paid for by your city budget, right?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
Those school districts, college districts, city, county are all separate entities.
Interesting.
And they all set their own tax rate and all have their own budgets.
Gotcha. Okay, so that was going to lead to my next question, which is, that close to Odessa, is Big Spring going to be fielding a football team this year? You guys know what's happening there? Have they talked about it yet?
One every year.
Yep. All right. Good enough, because I know that's one of the interesting things people are talking about. What is the football season going to look like?
Right.
And since
honestly,
I have
at this point, we don't know.
Yep.
I chat with the superintendent of schools pretty much every week, and I haven't gotten a report on that yet. I mean, obviously there's some concerns this year,
right.
But I haven't gotten a report specifically on the football team yet.
Gotcha. Well, because I know, I mean, we have two mayors on from states that both have won national championships, although Texas not since Vince Young. But I'm interested in the same thing for you, Mayor Fryman. Is the school budget part of your city budget, or is it separate?
It is separate.
Okay. And then, do you know what are Plymouth schools planning on doing? Do they have things set up for the fall yet?
They do. Ohio is kind of taking a nuanced approach to it. I guess from what I've understood so far, it's limited spectators. Everyone on the team has to get tested every so often, rather frequently from what I understand. So I don't know how that's going to pan out or what that's going to look like when it's up and up running, but I guess there's going to be a lot of different catches for it.
Now, it's interesting, and let me just throw this out to both of you at the same time. There's this unique situation in our country's history. You guys are mayors, and you're in a very rare group. There's, I believe, 13 elected Libertarian mayors across the country. Do you guys have any sort of club, Libertarian Mayors Club group, some sort of thing?
No,
it's a great idea. I think we need to organize one.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things I was thinking about is you guys have real world experience and probably what's some of the low-hanging fruit that you can, like, I mean, when Mayor Thomason, I saw you talking about the budgets being cut. I saw Mayor Fryman nodding along. I'm like, wow, it's a shared experience that a lot of libertarians are probably thinking about. And, what's the hedge against people roaring back and saying, okay, I mean, knock on wood, right? We're all back to normal in a year. And then, we don't want to see those budgets go back up again. And so that's a fascinating idea. Are there other things that you think of that are, and I'll throw this out to either one of you, that are low-hanging fruit that if you knew that a new libertarian was elected mayor somewhere, you'd say, this is something that you can look at in the budget right now, or this is something that you can do by ordinance or something like that, that's really easy to make a difference on?
Well, I can say for my part, one of the things that I ran into early on, and I had actually ran on this, was, and it's something that's really easy, and all you have to do is work with the rescue folks. But getting your, if you've got a city animal shelter, getting them the no-kill status.
Interesting.
And
go ahead, sir.
Well, we had terrible euthanasia numbers with our animal shelter. And so just working with our shelter is run by a police department. And so coordinating with the chief of police, who was constantly being hammered by some of the rescue folks, and rightly so, and getting with him and saying, look, let's change our attitude on this. Okay, first of all, we need to be doing full vaccination for everything short of rabies whenever they come in the door, because right after I got elected, we had a distemper outbreak in our animal shelter. And that was one of the complaints that the rescue folks aired to me, was that they were rescuing dogs out of our animal shelter and they were getting sick. And the reason was we weren't vaccinated for basic illnesses. So one of the things I worked with was we quickly got an emergency order in calling for the vaccinations, worked closely with the rescues to get adoptable dogs out of the animal shelter.
Right.
And I got my latest numbers yesterday. And since August 1st of last year to July 31st of this year, we have not euthanized a single dog for space. Now, for humane reasons or aggressive dogs that are unadoptable, yes, we have euthanized.
Right.
But to clear out space in our animal shelter, not a one.
And that leads to a fascinating thing. Now, I was going to, and I'll throw this to you, Mayor Fryman. There are times that, as a mayor, and you know this, that there is a role for government. There is a job for you to do as mayor. How many times have you had a libertarian say to you, well, hang on there, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how city government's supposed to run.
Well, I mean, it's a very real issue. You have to remember that you're working within a broken system. So it's your job to do what's best for the people of your community with the tools you have. A really good example of that is something that's happening right now. We had a historic building. Somebody drove a car through the front of it while they were under the influence, and they didn't have insurance. It was a stolen car. The back of the building collapsed this week, and it's going to take about $125,000 to $150,000 to demo this building. So what we had to do was we reached out to the land bank of our county to see if they would do the demolition, because the village does not have the funds to handle this, and the owner of the property did not have insurance on the property. So it was a hazard. It needs to come down immediately. So I had to use the resources that were available to me. So some people see a land bank as an organization unfavorably because it does take the land essentially, but that's not what they're doing in this case. But we had to get it done and had to find the money somewhere and had to work with another government body in order to make this happen. And that's just what you have to do sometimes. You have to do what's best for your people. I can't have a building collapse on the street, literally. Someone could get killed, or, property can be damaged to the surrounding buildings. So that's one thing that I've had to utilize. And another example would be issuing the federal, the emergency orders that we shut down our public offices to the public in order to keep our employees safe. So there have been a couple of instances where things have had to come into play to kind of make sure what's best for everybody happens, essentially.
Well, and that's another great question, and I'm going to come back to you, Mayor Thomason, on this. I'm willing to bet that most of the people who voted for you are not libertarians.
Oh, absolutely not.
Does that, and there's this responsibility that they voted for you to be their mayor.
Sure.
How much of that do you weigh that in sort of the decisions that you are making? You're not just mayor for libertarians, you're mayor of all of Big Spring.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, and you've got to always remember that you represent everyone. If you've got council districts, they should be concentrating on their districts. But, you as the mayor, you are the overall representative for all the citizens. So, that always has to be taken into consideration.
And in Big Spring, is it a city council form of government? Do you have a city manager, city council? Okay.
It's a manager council form of government. So we have a professional city manager and then a a very, very low paid council who sets policy and directs the general, or guides the general direction of the city is probably the best way to put it.
Gotcha. Well, and so now, Mayor Fryman, let me come back to you with sort of the same question a little bit. Can you tell me, is Plymouth a city council? Is it, are you just a strong mayor and there's a town meeting? What is the form of government in
we have a
Plymouth?
professional administrator and council as well. So the administrator's job is to run the village, and council is to generally guide legislative policy and the direction that the village is going in, and they are extremely low paid as well. So my job is to preside over the meetings and day-to-day things that come up, issues that come up like building collapses. I kind of handle that stuff too as it comes up.
And the job requires a lot of improvisation, right? You're faced with a lot of things that can you talk about that a little bit? Some of the scenarios that you never thought you would be dealing with as mayor?
Well, I mean, it was a pretty steep learning curve this year, starting in January and having a crisis happen in February. But that was one thing. I wasn't expecting this historic building, the biggest building on the square, to start collapsing either. And it's just kind of been one thing after another with those issues. Another thing that I was surprised was we have food trucks up at the square to help vendors who have had festivals and fairs canceled on them. They have the opportunity to come up to our square once a week and see if they can make a living on there. And it's also impartially a fundraiser for the nonprofit as well. But we've had some pushback from some of the businesses kind of disliking them being there. So I wasn't expecting that either. So just different issues that have come up have surprised me, absolutely.
And I guess, of course, the biggest surprise of all is global pandemic, right? Nobody thought when they got elected that was coming down the pike. So I would imagine that, you were talking about this earlier, Mayor Thomason, about how, you guys have started to see certainly more than you had in March. There's more instances of COVID, certainly all in Texas. But how is your area specifically doing right now?
Well, right now we're not too bad. Luckily, smaller towns aren't hit nearly as hard as the higher population centers. And out here in West Texas, we're pretty well spread out anyway. We kind of have a natural form of social distancing.
Right.
It's called miles. But luckily enough, here right now, in fact, I checked the numbers just before I came on. We have in our city and county, which is roughly 36,000 people, we're showing 69 active cases, 90 recovered, and we've had 4 deaths.
And how much do you as mayor get involved in sort of what's happening with the plan? Is it something that happens at the city level, county level, state level?
All of the above. As I said, I'm the emergency management director for the city of Big Spring. So I'm actually involved in COVID-19 discussions every single day.
So that leads me, let me come back to Mayor Fryman about that a little bit. Now, Plymouth, I talked a little bit for people talking about where Big Spring is. People, I think, know Odessa Permian, and you're right off Interstate 20, right? Shannon?
Who, me?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay.
We're Interstate 20 and US 87, which should hopefully soon be designated by the Senate as I-27.
Well, that'll be very exciting. Where is Plymouth, Ohio, Mayor Fryman?
We're in a cornfield. No, we are.
You're going to have to be more descriptive than that for Ohio.
We're about 20 minutes north of Mansfield, and we're about 45 minutes south of Sandusky, which is where Cedar Point is. So most people, when you're talking big picture Ohio, we just say we're under Cedar Point, and people generally know where we are.
Gotcha. Cedar Point is the big amusement park?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The Rocky Roller Coast.
I do know where that is. I have driven around there a couple times. So let me ask you a slightly different question. So,
Okay.
when you ran for office as a person who had never been had not been in politics beforehand, how did you decide this is what I'm going to do? This is how I'm going to organize my campaign. This is how I'm going to run.
There really wasn't much to do. It was a non-contested election. The mayor that was here before me did not want to seek re-election.
Wow.
So I pretty much walked into it. I didn't have to really do any campaigning, or I didn't even do a newspaper interview.
That's interesting. So let me ask you this then. How much is the budget? Because I'm guessing if it's uncontested, we're talking about a relatively small budget.
Our fiscal budget is about $780,000.
That's bigger than I thought it was going to be. But I'm glad to hear that it's not it was. Do you think that if you hadn't run, nobody would have run? Or was it something about you that kept everybody out?
Well, I did it at the last minute, basically. I really contemplated whether or not I was going to do it. And then I gathered my signatures quietly and just submitted them on the last week. The previous mayor would have accepted it if no one else had ran. He'd have done it again, but he was to the point where he wasn't actively seeking it either. But he'd had 12 years, so I think he was just kind of tired. But yeah, I mean, I saw the opening and I took it.
It's an interesting thing, and I think that a lot of libertarians could benefit from that sort of example, that there are a lot of elected offices that go unfilled, that if a libertarian were to serve, and you now have established that, and I hate to keep coming back on this, but a lot of times people think that when a libertarian gets elected, they're going to do all sorts of crazy things, and you've done an incredible service for libertarians everywhere by demonstrating you are a rational person. You are not going to school the city, get rid of the government, close down the schools, or anything like that. Have you found that you start, because obviously as a mayor you work with people in your city, but you work with officials at a larger level as well. Have you found that that's something that at various points of time, is anybody further, I don't want to say higher up the food chain, but at a different body of government, have they expressed a surprise at what you are as a libertarian? That you're not what they expected?
I don't think so. I really haven't had bad experiences with anybody I've worked with. I actually we have a mayor's lunch monthly with Richland County, which is one of the counties that Plymouth straddles. And we just talk and help each other. Everyone's very supportive. We're only a phone call away to each other. The county commissioners have been awesome to work with. I mean, everyone at the local level seems to be very much on board with doing their best to help the communities. And so I really can't say enough good things about the people that I've had interactions with. They've just been very supportive.
And that's a great thing. I'll come to you with this, Mayor Thomason, that there is this camaraderie among the people who are serving in local government, because nobody else understands what the job is actually like. It's not like what people at home think it's like. It's not like what it appears like on TV or anything like that. Can you talk about your working with other officials, both in your town, obviously, but then at the higher level, and how, sort of you guys inform each other about what it's like? Like, have people seen you and said, oh, I see you doing all these great things in Big Spring. That's not what I thought a libertarian would have done. Has that ever come up?
Well, yeah, certainly. Like I said, when I'm coming out against closures, and Dan, you were at the convention. You might have heard my opening remarks at the beginning of the convention. What do you get when you get a libertarian mayor? You get restrictions placed on government instead of on the citizens.
Right.
So
and that's that's a fascinating thing. So when you ran for office, I'm going to guess that you weren't unopposed.
No.
So tell me a little bit about your campaign, how you got organized. Had you been on the city council before?
No. I'd run in the past, but this time, this was actually my first time running for office as a Libertarian. I'd always ran as a Republican prior to that. And it's a nonpartisan race, so there's not a you don't declare a party. Now I announced and let people know that I consider myself a conservative Libertarian. So in the race there was myself, an establishment Republican, a very young Republican, and then a Democrat. Now, Howard County, Texas is roughly 90% Republican and very conservative, but as am I. So, I like to think that I held my own during the general election. It came down to a runoff. We were a little over, our city population is a little over 28,000. We've got about half of that are registered voters. And in the citywide election, in the general election, we had a little over 1,500 people vote. Well, it came down to a runoff between myself and the establishment Republican. And I was the second highest vote getter in the general. But we took that month and came back in and kept our spirits high and our attitudes great, and we got a lot of support and turned around, and I won in the runoff by 14 points.
Wow.
And we had 600 more voters go to the polls in a runoff than we did in the general election.
So who do you think you picked up the most votes from? I mean, I would imagine people who are going to vote for the Democrats, the 10% of the people who are Democrats, they're not going to vote for either of the Republicans. But the, I guess when we say young Republican, we're sort of saying progressive Republican.
Well, no, just.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm very young. And that's not a, and certainly nothing, I don't mean that in any way.
Sure. I more than that, I'm talking. I just want to talk about the election strategy of it, because we don't have a lot of libertarians who have had a lot of experience of going into a runoff and sort of assessing, what do I do now? How do I appeal to the other people in the race and get their votes? And so you actually had a unique situation in that. What can you tell me a little bit about what your campaign team looked like?
Oh Lord. Well, of course it's small town politics. So, one of my big supporters was the local firefighters association. They really came out and put both boots on the ground, and you just can't discount the power of going door to door. Sure.
Well, and I think that's. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I think that probably more than anything, probably helped put me over the top. But like I said, whenever it came down to a choice between the two, the rank and file citizens of Big Spring, took a look at the establishment candidate and said, if we elect this person, we're getting the same thing we've gotten for years. And
Gotcha.
he said, we're trying to mix it up, trying to get creative now. And number one, take care of the problems that we've got. And while we're at it, try to improve the city.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think improving the city too is something that, that's a good goal for a mayor. And so
Sure.
Mayor Fryman, what's coming down the road for you guys? I mean, obviously you still have a lot of COVID stuff going on, but I would imagine that you have some other goals for Plymouth. Can you tell us about any of those?
Absolutely. Something that I really focus on is economic development. Any opportunity to push business, encourage growth is something that I'm going to jump on. Right now, I'm just in the very beginning process of looking into a CRA designation for our community. And what that would do was give tax breaks to people who are bringing new business in and bringing new construction for housing in. Because once you get
CRA stand
housing,
for?
Community Reinvestment Act. And what
Gotcha.
it does is it allows you to not charge the property tax on the structures that are being built, just on the property. So it gives them up to a 15-year break. It doesn't cost you anything to do it, and you're not losing revenue because that was revenue you never would have had to begin with anyways. So it's a virtually cost-free incentive for people to come to your community with their businesses, with their home building aspirations. You can also qualify for it if you are improving the home that you've bought. So if you buy a dilapidated house and you repair it and flip it, it gives you incentive to do improvement for what you buy as well. So I'm really focusing in on something like that in the very near future as well.
Well, I love it that it's an incentive that doesn't cost the city anything, but it saves the taxpayer money because they don't have to pay taxes. That's the ultimate libertarian solution. How about you? Yeah. How about you, Mayor Thomason? What's coming down the road for Big Spring?
Well, we're looking at a lot more improvement or renovation and improvements coming to our downtown area. Dan, I don't know, were you one of the folks that stayed at the Hotel Settles?
I was running the technical thing from here in DC. No, I shouldn't say running the technical thing either. I just set up the Zoom.
Right. A few years ago, our centerpiece building here in Big Spring was the Hotel Settles, and a 16-story hotel built in 1929, right at the beginning of the Great Depression, and it had sat vacant for decades, so by the time I came to Big Spring in 2000, it was the tallest pigeon roost between Fort Worth and El Paso. So, but a businessman that grew up here in Big Spring came back in, had a dream of renovating it, and threw millions of dollars into the project, and also worked a public-private partnership with the city of Big Spring, and we worked out some tax abatements, and now it's just a beautiful centerpiece to our downtown. And we're working with him and other businesses to renovate other historic buildings in our downtown area, and to really make it a showpiece for West Texas. And then along the way, we're also working with local developers with incentive programs, again, to, number one, increase housing, which during the oil boom was a huge problem for us. Having affordable housing for folks. People were moving into the area faster than we could put them in houses. So housing values went up drastically. So right now, that has kind of come to a halt. So we've got a little breathing room on that. So we're working with developers and providing incentive programs for new developments, but also for infill developments in existing subdivisions. So where you have a vacant lot in the middle of a neighborhood, they will get additional incentives to build in that lot to help redevelop and reinvigorate existing neighborhoods.
Well, that's awesome. So we're coming up. We got 5 minutes left in the show. I'm going to ask you guys both for a favor. Talk about, because 2021, we have this vision. 2020, obviously, we're electing the first Libertarian president. But 2021, we have this vision that we're going to have a lot more success at municipal elections. I wonder if you could tell people how rewarding it is to be serving your fellow city, townspeople, stuff like that, what it's like to be involved in municipal government. Because I worry sometimes some libertarians think that the best option is to take their ball and go home. But it can be a rewarding experience. Can you talk about that a little bit, Mayor Thomason? And then I'll come to you, Mayor Fryman.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I don't find anything more rewarding than being able to fix a problem for someone. Like I said, we were lucky enough to be able to fix a problem for LP Texas.
Right.
But I deal with that on a daily basis. I'm very involved, very active on Facebook with my constituents. And so, yeah, I get Facebook messages every day about somebody's trash didn't get picked up, or there's a leak on this street, or there's a pothole on this street. And so I dutifully, to the best of my ability, forward those on to the departments and see what I can't do to help out the individuals.
That's awesome. And Mayor Fryman, the way you chuckled there, I'm guessing you have a similar experience.
Oh, yes. I think trash is a weekly discussion, as is lawns and who's mowing and who's keeping up with all of that. Those are the small town problems that you're going to hear about all the time. But really what the goal is to make your community somewhere where your children love to grow up. That's what I envisioned. Making it as good of a place as possible, because you want your kids to have a good community to thrive in. And that means making it better for everyone else's kids as well. So, it's really about bringing people together and creating a sense of community where you live. It is rewarding, especially when once what you're doing, it starts to be successful, it makes other people realize I could do this too, which is where the other two libertarians running in 21 come into play. One of them came from my volunteer organization. The other one is a volunteer firefighter. And, it's exciting because if they come as well, they have their perspectives that they're bringing to the table, but we're all unified under this belief that what we can do can achieve a greater community for us and our kids. And that's what really drives a lot of people here. And I'm really excited about being able to live it and use it and create a foundation of success for the people who run for offices higher than my own. I think having that base is essential to their success. And I would love to see more municipal libertarians elected in the coming year so that we can grow that.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you guys both for being here. And I want to acknowledge the fact that while you guys were here during this show, John Hughes from Mechanicsville, Virginia, became a member of the Libertarian Party. So this sort of broadcast
Excellent.
Makes a difference. We appreciate you guys doing this sort of thing. Also, I think you represent one of the things that, this is a time, I think, where a lot of us, we see, and I'm sure you guys see this even more, there is some despair in this country. There are a lot of people who are down. They're worried that we don't know what the way out of this is. And you guys are a shining example of the fact that libertarians say, we don't have to know what the specific example is. We just have to be willing to do the next right thing. And you guys are doing that. And so I want to thank you for the Libertarian Party. Mayor Fryman from Plymouth, Ohio, Mayor Thomason from Big Spring, Texas. Everybody, this has been a broadcast of Libertarian Party Television. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the executive director. You can join at lp.org/join. You can become a member. Find out more about our presidential candidate, Joe Jorgensen, at joe20.com. And I look forward to seeing you here next Thursday night as we have another episode of LPTV.